Maison. My book, Elmet, is the story of a family building a house for themselves in the countryside on land they don't own. And they build the house with their bare hands, and then they live in it together, and they grow their own food and they cook and eat. And then slowly the outside forces begin to circle them, and the home that they've built for themselves comes under attack. So houses and home are where the story begins and where the story ends. Nature. One of the main themes of the book is who has the right to the land and who has the right to live on the land. So the family at the heart of Elmet live in a way which is responsible and sustainable, and although they don't own the land, in many respects they have much more right to it than the landowners whose names are on the title deeds. When I was writing the book, I really wanted to focus on elements of the natural world and make sure that the house that they were living in was situated within the landscape, and I wanted to focus on the birds and the animals that they shared their surroundings with, and I wanted to focus on the soil and the earth and the trees and the plants that they live among. So nature is one of the biggest themes of the book. Communauté. 3 characters are at the heart of this book: a father and his teenage son and daughter, and they live for the most part on their own, away from the rest of society, but it's inevitable that they have to come into contact with the outside world. So first they come into contact with the landowners who are trying to take their home from them, and then they manage to find friends in the local community. And it's a community that is in a part of England that is very deprived, post-industrial. It used to be filled with coal mines and factories and woolen mills, and now there are very few jobs. It's been forgotten, and so members of this community rally round the family. And there's a moment of collective action. They establish a kind of a union, and they work together to fight back against the landowners and the local powerful men who have the community under their grip. So I suppose the family discover that they aren't alone, and that they are part of a wider network, a wider community. Genre. The narrator of the book, Danny, is a boy of around 14, 15, and although he's a boy, he also has questions about his gender, and I wanted very much for him to use his own words to describe his experience. So they live in quite an isolated place, and they don't have recourse to gender theory or terminology that is very useful, but also limiting sometimes. So he's working through his own experience of gender, his own experience of his identity, and he's describing it using the words that he has available to him. I also wanted to explore other types of gender in the family. So the father figure is this kind of super macho man. He's straight out of a folk tale. He's not the kind of person you'd meet. He's sort of nearly 7 foot tall, and he's extremely strong and powerful. And I wanted to sort of situate this very extreme form of masculinity against his son, who has a very different experience of his own body and his identity. And then also there's Kathy, who's the daughter, who in terms of her temperament is much more like her father, but is physically nothing like him at all. So I wanted each of the members of the family to have very different experience of living in the world because of their bodies and the way that they see their gender, although they never use the word gender. Écriture. when I was writing the book, it was really important to me to get into the voice of Daniel, the narrator. And as I was writing, I felt that I wasn't any longer in my own voice, but I tapped into his voice. And I suppose I did that by just trying to sort of immerse myself in what he was going through, and try and use the kind of language that he might have used. I also wanted to make sure that I was describing everything very precisely, the natural world and the house and the action of the novel. I wanted to use very sort of clear, deliberate prose. I suppose in terms of prose, I was influenced by writers like John Burnside, a Scottish writer, and Cormac McCarthy. And in many respects, I sort of see this book, Elmet, as being a bit like a Western, but set in the north of England rather than in Texas or wherever. So, the writing kind of followed that mode.